So welcome everyone to our webinar about the CCHI certification exam, tips for taking the oral performance exam. I'm very excited to hold this webinar because, as many of you know, we have done some upgrades to the testing platform, to the software. So although the content of the exam has not changed, but it took us several months to do the upgrade, and we're really happy that we started scheduling the exam, and I'll talk about the logistics and about the exam itself today. My name is Natalya Mytareva. I'm the Executive Director at CCHI, and I also have the honor of being one of the founding commissioners, and in the commission, both as a volunteer and as a staff person, one of my main responsibilities is exam development and maintenance. So I should be able to answer all the questions that you may have about our exams. I will start with the overview of the certification in general and then proceed to specifically the CCHI exam. As you know, the Certification Commission for Healthcare Interpreters is a national organization whose purpose is to administer a valid, credible, and vendor-neutral certification to healthcare interpreters. We're very proud to have accredited exams by a third party called the National Commission for Certifying Agencies. We offer two tiers of certifications. One is called the Core CCHI certification, which stands for Core Certification Healthcare Interpreter. And this certification is available to interpreters of any language for which there is no performance exam. The test administered for that certification is a multiple choice knowledge test that assesses your knowledge about healthcare interpreting. And the second tier of certification is the performance language specific certification that is available currently in 3 languages: Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin. In other words, if you're a Spanish, Arabic, or Mandarin interpreter, you cannot stop at the core level. You need to proceed to the higher level, which is CCHI, Certified Healthcare Interpreter Certification. The purpose of our program when we founded this organization in 2009 was and has been to develop and direct a comprehensive certification program for healthcare interpreters in order to assess their competence and ultimately to help ensure quality of interpreting in any healthcare setting and any modality in the United States. I highlighted here the word comprehensive because from the very beginning we wanted to design a program that would meet the needs of any interpreter. And as you realize that the core CCHI level as it exists now with a just knowledge exam is not truly enough to claim that we achieved this goal of having comprehensive certification. And for that reason, we have started a new initiative that a year ago, actually over a year ago, called the English to English Research Study. And you may have heard about it, but the reason for it was that we need to create a valid and reliable performance examination that will assess the core cognitive skills of interpreters that are responsible for successful conversion of meaning from one language into another. And to do that for interpreters of languages for which developing a bilingual exam is not feasible. In other words, if you're an interpreter, and I see some of you on the line here of let's say Tigrinya or Burmese, Karen, the chances that we develop an oral performance exam in English and your language are very small because we don't have a big enough pool of subject matter experts, and the investment of developing that kind of exam will not is simply not achievable. So we still though want to make sure that we have this ability to somehow assess your interpreting skills, not just knowledge about the healthcare interpreting profession. And we hope that this study will help us achieve that. Our goal is to determine, first of all, do interpreters possess interpreting cognitive skills that are responsible for the conversion of meaning from one language into another. In other words, if we take two bilingual individuals who one of them would say that, oh, I'm an interpreter, and the other one says, I'm just, speak French and English, how do we know that the person who says they're an interpreter can actually interpret? What skills they have other than knowing English and, let's say, French very well? What makes them the interpreter? And for that matter, a translator too, because conversion in written medium will be the same as conversion in the oral medium. So that's one question that we hope to answer with this study. Do we have those special interpreting skills, which will definitely be skills of cognition? And then the second question is, can we measure those interpreting skills in a monolingual format? In other words, not resorting to two languages like a normal interpreting test, like a CCHI test is. And with that, if we are able to answer these questions, we will then be able to produce an exam that would benefit for all interpreters for whom the oral exam doesn't exist. But after this brief introduction to our programs and what we do, let's talk about specifically the CCHI exam logistics. So as I mentioned, it exists in 3 languages, Arabic, Mandarin, and Spanish, and interpreters of these 3 languages need to take 2 exams. First, they need to pass the core CCHI exam. That's a requirement for everybody. And that exam, core CCHI exam, is accredited as a standalone certification for all languages except these 3. And then these individuals need to take the oral performance exam in their language specifically. And we're very happy that our Spanish CCHI exam is also accredited by NCCA. The Arabic and Mandarin exams follow the same model. They have some content. They are scored the same way. The raters do the same, undergo the same training. And we monitor the exams the same way as the Spanish exam that is accredited. However, due to the low volume of those exams, we did not seek accreditation, for those 2 exams yet, but never say never. Because our CCHI exam is accredited and because it produces the model for all other CCHI exams, we must follow certain standards. And if, for example, you ask yourself questions, why do they do it that way? How did they do it? Most of the time it's because of this accreditation. One of the requirements is that all the examination content must be written by subject matter experts who are volunteer practitioners of that profession. So if you're a nurse, then the certification exams for nurses needs to be written by nurses, not by instructors who teach nurses, but by nurses who are practicing today. And the same applies to our exam. So we engaged in writing the actual dialogues, the actual monologues for the oral exam, by interpreters. And then the second requirement to those subject matter experts is that they need to be just a group of individuals who represent the profession. In other words, we cannot have subject matter experts who are all, let's say, from California, or all who are just freelancers, or all who just speak Spanish. We need to make sure that when the exams are written, we have SMEs representing different aspects of our profession, because we need to prevent undue or disproportionate influence of any individual or group. And as we update our exams every 2 years, we convene new groups, and that ensures that our subject matter experts are current practitioners of interpreting. And the last but not least important factor is that all these subject matter experts need to be trained in actually writing, reviewing, and editing the items, and that's done by us and by our psychometric team. As far as the process itself, as you can see, there are many steps, and I'll be very brief with it. We start with a national survey called National Job Task Analysis, where we ask questions. Does a certified interpreter need to know terminology about OBGYN? right? Does a certified interpreter need to know the codes of ethics? Does a certified interpreter need to be able to interpret consecutively, simultaneously, etc.? So based on the respondents' responses to this survey, we create the exam specifications, and according to these specifications, we develop the items first in English by a group of those subject matter experts. Then we convene individual groups for each language, Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin, and adapt, or I don't want to use the word translate because it's not a direct translation, but we take the English content and the words that represent the patient who would be speaking in Spanish, Arabic, or Mandarin. Those subject matter experts adapt to sound as natural and as fluent and as typical for the patients of that specific language and not for English. And if, for example, some words in English have some connotation with, let's say, Arabic or Spanish doesn't have, then we replace those words. So there is minor variations. I can give you an example of one variation: name, right? If in a Spanish exam you will have Mrs. Martinez, then on the Mandarin exam it will be Mrs. Chen, or Arabic it will be Mrs. Faraj. So those are the minor variations I'm talking about. The rest of the content is the same on all three exams. Then we build the forms, making sure that there are as many items representing different types of healthcare environments as possible, because we don't want to be biased. And let's say if everything is about diabetes, right, then a person who's never interpreting in for diabetic patients will be at a disadvantage. So we want to make sure that we kind of create a test form that tests your knowledge of different specialties. Then we train our raters, and they actually go training 4 times a year before each time they score the exams to ensure that they do it the same way. And we also run statistical analysis on how they do it to make sure that they don't disagree. And I will talk about the rating process later on. Then we administer the exams, and we'll look and review at the statistics, how many people passed, how many people failed, all that stuff. And if we see that there needs to be some adjustment, we do that. And then the job task analysis is held every 5 to 7 years. And as soon as the new results are in, we start the circle again and again. So the reason I'm going into this depth is to let you know that the content has been reviewed and looked at, and your results are assessed by practicing interpreters. It is done always by a group of people, so it is not one person's opinion that is reflected in our test construction. All the information that I will share today is also available on our website. We're a virtual organization. We don't have a brick and mortar building other than a small office where we get our mail in Washington, D.C. Everything, our office is our website. So I strongly encourage you to definitely check out different places on our website, cchicertification.org. And you would start with this navigation button, which is present on every page, called Get Certified. When you click on it, you get your choice whether you are still in the process of certification. That's all for you. And after you get certified, there is another place there, which is if you're already certified. You also can utilize our menu button, this little round thing. Then it opens this navigation. And here you can see the word certifications. That's where you will find information about different types of different questions, which may answer different questions about the interpreter. All right. Now, another resource I recommend strongly for you is the Candidates Examination Handbook. So the Candidates Handbook contains the information both about exams and about CCHI's policies. And that is important for you to know because there you will see how the tests are administered, when their score results are back, what are the retakes policy. We update it once a year. The new edition will be coming out soon in early January, but the major updates are about the actual renewal policy, which is the same, but the procedure is slightly different. Now, when we talk about the exam, it is computer-based because nowadays you cannot do anything without that. It is in 2 languages, and in the exam there are 7. You produce 7 oral responses, and there is 1 multiple-choice question. You have 60 minutes to complete the exam. And the exam the testing takes place during the specific testing windows, and I'll talk about that in a second more. You will be tested in a private room, not in the same place where you had, for example, your core CCHI exam. And for that reason, when you schedule the exam, you will see that there are fewer appointments available because usually for each test center we have only 1 private room. It will be the same test centers, but it's 1 private room, which of course may be occupied not just by us, but by customers of other testing programs. And unlike core CCHI exam, the scores will be available not immediately, but within 6 to 8 weeks after the last date of testing window. However, because we are restarting testing this time in January, we will try to see if we can shorten this period and make it within 4 to 8 weeks after your date of testing. I know it doesn't sound like very shorter, but I don't want to predict how it will work because this is a new pattern for us, but we truly want to make it shorter. On average, in the beginning of this year and in 2018, we delivered the responses within about 5 weeks after the last day of testing. So we want to shorten that to give you an idea. We never did 8 weeks, to tell you the truth. It was somewhere between 4 and 5 weeks, mostly 5 the last testing windows. But we'll see if we will be able to do the new workflow and do it quicker, and if that works, then you will see here within 4 weeks the new slide will be added. So when can you take the exam? First of all, you have 12 months after you pass the core CCHI to take the CCHI exams. We cannot give you indefinite moment because when we say that you are certified, we mean that you both reflect the current knowledge of the profession, and that's the core CCHI exam, and your skills. And if the gap between the two is more than a year, then the knowledge, some part of the knowledge may become obsolete. If you don't take the exam within 12 months, then you will have to take the core CCHI exam again to ascertain that your knowledge is current. In other words, after you pass your core CCHI exam, that's when you need to log in and then pay the CCHI exam fee, which is $275. And then within 10 days of payment, you will get your notice to schedule the exam, which looks exactly like the notice to schedule for the core CCHI exam, except for the words of the exam name will be Certified Healthcare Interpreter, and in brackets there will be CHIS, CHIA, CHIM, which S, A, and M stands for Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin. These are the abbreviations that the test center will have in their computer system, and that's why we included them in brackets in the notice to schedule. Now, as far as scheduling the exam, as I mentioned earlier, it takes place 4 times a year, and the testing, we call these periods testing windows. That's the term CCHI uses, and they're listed on our scheduling webpage, which looks like that. So if you go to the menu and you do the search scheduling, that's what will take you there directly. But if you click on those buttons from certifications, you'll get it eventually to the same place called scheduling. Our testing is done by a testing company called Prometric. It's one of the world's leaders in testing, and you may know it because they deliver exams of TOEFL, which many of us who are newcomers to this country had to take if we wanted to study or get professional jobs. They also deliver the California court interpreting exams and the federal court interpreting exam. So and of course many, many more for different professions. And they have, after you receive the notice to schedule in on our website, you'll get the link to their scheduling page. This is what the top of it looks like, and here you will click that link schedule, and it'll take you through the steps. And for the scheduling, you will need to know your CCHI ID number, which is they call eligibility number, which is a 6-digit number. And you enter 4 letters of your name, and then you will be able to see which locations and times and dates are available to you, and then you schedule accordingly. Now, on Prometric's scheduling site, they also use the word testing window, but they have a different meaning. Isn't that funny? Words have different meanings, but I couldn't believe it when I saw it. But this is, when they say testing window on their part of the website, they actually mean your full eligibility. Like I just did a random search for one person, and their eligibility is from January 2020 through November 24th, 2020. It doesn't mean that it's one long testing window. Within these dates, there are 3 testing windows which are listed on CCHI's website. The first testing window is January 16th through March 14th, and then there are April, May, July, August, and October, November testing windows. Because of the wider network that Prometric provides us, and because of the abundance of clients that they serve, they have special requirements for rescheduling, and I advise you to plan carefully. So read those. They're both available on our website. And before you get even to this place, you will see their information that there is no fee if you reschedule 30 days or more in advance. But if you reschedule less than 30 days in advance, there is a $25 fee. And if you reschedule a 5 days and fewer, then there is a $130 fee. So be careful. Make sure that you schedule with a date that works really for you. If you otherwise, you may have to pay a fee. Each testing site has their own testing hours, their local time, when you will get the times on the screen for a specific test site that reflects the local time. So you don't need to worry about that. And the appointments are first come, first served basis. So again, plan accordingly. But the good thing is that you could schedule if you need to, not for the first upcoming testing window, but for the next one or the one in summer. So you really have the flexibility with this online scheduling. Now, the information I want to share with you, since many of you, I see the names are ready to schedule right now, I want to do a pitch for that Ink2E study that I just described earlier. We're looking for 300 volunteers, Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin candidates who are already eligible to take the certification, to take the 2 exams together. The exams, which are your CHI exam and the E2E interpreting skills exam in English. And we need you to take this on the same day, on the same appointment, and the window for that study is from January 23rd, which is a little less, through March 14th. And I know that some of you already sent us the email. Thank you very much. We will respond to it. We really need your help, because what we will do with the study, we will compare your results on both exams, and we'll see if our English to English exam, that E to E exam, really assesses the cognitive skills of interpreting and not, let's say, of your knowledge of English, because we know there are English proficiency exams, there are TOEFLs. We don't need to recreate that. We need to run this comparison, and for comparison to be valid, we need to compare it with your CHI exam. So the benefits that we offer, if any of you on this webinar who have not read our newsletter yet, the benefits we offer, first of all, you will help to advance the profession, because the data that we'll gather will help us either to develop this English exam for interpreters of any language, or to help, if for any reason we'll see that really it's very hard to do it in English only, then we will have this data available to instructors and trainers of interpreting, because they will know which activities help you develop your interpreting skills. We also will offer a discount. The discount is $100 off your CHI exam fee. If you already paid that fee, within 2 weeks after you take the E2E exam and your CHI exam, which is the same date, you will get a $100 check. If you haven't paid the fee, we will work with you and we'll just send you an invoice for a smaller amount, for $175. We also offer the opportunity for those of you who haven't taken the core CHI exam yet to take the CHI, the oral exam first, and then take the core. Some candidates think that the oral exam is harder, and so it's better to have it out of the way, because if you pass, then you kind of like, oh, now it's just the multiple choice left. But if you fail, you also think, oh, well, I'm not out of more nerves of taking 2 exams, right? So it's of course, a very personal and subjective opinion, but we felt that if there are individuals who are interested in doing it, we'll be able to do it. And as I said, I know many of you already sent the emails. We are processing and responding to them now, but the important part is to do 2 things. One is there is a online questionnaire that you need to complete by January 3rd, and I actually saw that several people already completed that. But the most important thing is most nerve-wracking. You need to wait. You need to wait till the week of January 6th. That's when I can send you the instructions on how to schedule, because that's when that will be available in the Prometric system. So don't schedule the oral exam yet. To tell you the truth, if you really, for any reason, rush and need to take your oral exam, then you cannot participate in the study because of that waiting period. But at the same time, you can all relax, enjoy the holidays, and then January 6th comes, and you can schedule your exam that they need to take place between January 23rd and March 14th. To participate, send an email to solutions@cchicertification.org, and I will send you, again, the link to the survey and the other instructions. I'm the point of contact for this study, so I will, respond to everybody personally within about 48 hours, and I look forward to working with you, and I will hope that I will get 300 new friends through that. Well, now let's talk about the exam content. First of all, I want you to keep in mind who the exam is for. It's for the entry-level healthcare interpreter. There are 2 things to keep in mind here. On the one hand is the word entry. That could be misleading, and you'll think entry means basic, means easy. Not so quickly. Entry level means that you don't have experience in working as an interpreter. The key words here is healthcare interpreter. That means that this is a person who is able to perform the functions of interpreting completely independently and unsupervised. And that means that you're able to interpret accurately everything you hear. You're not able, if you're making a mistake, you hear your mistake and you correct that mistake. And that's quite a lot. And you should be able to do that in any setting, And we have many settings, right? We have, let's say, emergency room, we have public health, we have OBGYN, we have cardiology, we have pediatrics, we have oncology, right? That's already getting harder and harder. And in any modality, meaning face-to-face, in person, over the phone or video, right? So, and of course you need to do it in accordance with the with the code of ethics and the cultural standards of your language and your patient population, as well as the cultural standards of the U.S. Healthcare. So if you think about each word in this definition of the entry-level interpreter, you should think of yourself as an entry-level neurosurgeon, right? What does he have to do or she have to do on their first day of job? Perform a surgery successful, that's so that the patient survives. It takes them about, 10, 15 years to study? That's how long it takes a person who doesn't know a second language to study to the level to become a successful entry-level healthcare interpreter. So don't ever shortchange yourself. Always compare yourself to the highest physicians possible. That's what entry-level really means. But what it also means is that on the exam, we cannot ask you to know terminology that is not common, that is not basic. Because that terminology, first of all, in real life, you will always be able to ask the physician to clarify for you, or nurse, or any other allied healthcare professional. But secondly, because you're just starting the profession, you don't have the variety of exposure to all the settings. So when you think of what could be on the exam, think of the width. In other words, the breadth of the coverage is pretty wide, right? But the depth of it, of how detailed you will go into it, that one is the entry level. Just if we think about terminology, the easiest comparison would be terms that you will hear on our exam will be like heart, lungs, legs, shoulder. You won't have cystourethrogram. You don't have those kind of terms in our exam. And the language will be typical for the of the language that you hear on a daily basis between doctor and patient, nurse and patient. So that's what distinguishes us, for example, from court interpreters. When court interpreters interpret, they hear the language of the judge, of the attorneys, of the defendant, who could be different educational level, right? So they have to have a wider range of registers and a wider range of knowledge of the language, while we are in this nice niche of somewhat everyday language with some specialization on healthcare. So don't be afraid. And in fact, most candidates who take the exam say, oh, it was easy in terms of the language. But it is still checking your interpreting abilities, and that could be hard because, as you all know, we're a very intimate profession. When we interpret, if you're already interpreting, you know there's only doctor and the patient, and none of them know the other's language as well as you do. So you really are the main expert in the room at that time, and nobody can tell whether you're doing a good job or a bad job. So exam, for many of us, becomes that first moment when somebody tells you, well, you're not as good as you thought, right? Or it could tell you right on par or you're excellent. So it's a good and a bad thing. And as an adult who is afraid of exams as anybody else, I can tell you that it's not very comfortable. But it's important because it reasserts your confidence in what you're doing. Because, again, we're an intimate profession. Nobody really works in teams. If you think of court interpreters, again, when they interpret for trial, there are teams of two. So somebody will always hear what they're saying, and they could correct them. But if we're medical interpreters, we just work in isolation. So this is an opportunity for you to get confident. On the exam, we have 4 different domains or areas that we check. Your skills in interpreting consecutively, and that constitutes 75% of the exam, and your score is weighted at 75% for that section. Those are just dialogues. Then interpret simultaneously, 14%. Site translate, 9%. And translate healthcare documents, 2%. First of all, those percentages come from that National Job Task Analysis study, from that survey. So we didn't invent them. That comes from there. Now, translate. Of course, you and I, we all know interpreters and translators are two different professions. However, on that job task analysis, we got responses that say that at least, the last one was done in 2016, that at least 65% of the time providers ask interpreters to do some simple translations. And those simple translations would be writing down for patients something like, if your temperature gets higher than 103 degrees, call this number, right? So they're not asked necessarily to translate huge documents, but they're asked to translate something. And because the national survey says that that's what interpreters are asked to do, and our exam is telling the public that people who get our certification are able to work in healthcare settings today in the United States, we have to include this skills assessment on our exam. I hope in the next job task analysis, which will be about 2022, 2023, that the respondents say, well, you know what? Now everybody knows who the interpreter is, and nobody asks them to do translation, and then we'll remove that question. It's the good thing, though, it's only 2% of your score, and it's really one questions hour only. So the exam specifications are described in a brief format in our publication, which are available from our CCHI exam description page. Just do a search CCHI exam on the website, and you'll get to this page from which you can download this PDF, which describes you the same thing I'm going to tell you about now. So for the consecutive section, you get 4 consecutive vignettes or dialogues, bidirectional dialogues. So this is just a doctor and a patient, or a nurse and a patient speaking. Then there are 2 simultaneous vignettes. They are unidirectional, and one is in English and one is in Spanish. L stands for language too, right? In Spanish, Arabic, or Mandarin. Then there is a side translation item, which represents, which has 3 passages, 3 excerpts from healthcare documents that are typically asked to be site translated. And then the testing of translation skills is done through a multiple choice question. Now let's talk about consecutive. So consecutive vignette is a dialogue which can have up to 24 utterances, usually somewhere around 18 utterances. An utterance is a turn of speech by one speaker, right? It could be, hi, my name is Dr. Smith. How are you today, Ms. Hernandez? Each utterance is up to 35 words. So some are shorter, some are longer. There are no utterances that are over 35 words. And you're allowed to take notes, so keep that in mind. You can play each utterance in a vignette a maximum of 2 times. But while and you cannot pause. You have to, listen to the utterance, which usually lasts between 2 to 10 seconds, right? It's not long. 35 words are not long. But if you keep replaying each utterance, the time will run. And as I said, it's 60 minutes. You control the time between the utterances. But the time that is allotted for you to record your response has been assessed by those subject matter experts. They, each one took the exam and they wrote down how many seconds it took them to do that. And then we, took the longest time. I promise you it's the longest time. And that's what became the standard time for this exam. So it's important that when you hear the utterance, and if it's something like, thank you very much, doctor, you're not going to replay it twice. You save yourself some time. But if you hear the utterances like, well, doctor, first I went left, then I fell down, and I think my left knee gave up, right? That's already a longer thing. If you kind of didn't jot down the first time, it's about left, and then listen to it again. If you understood everything, You don't need to listen to it again, because you're again in charge of your own time. I know at this moment you're thinking like, oh, how much time does it take? Average time that candidates who pass the exam take is about 40 minutes out of 60. So there's plenty of time for you. The candidates who do take 60 minutes and they pass, of course. And there are candidates who are cut off, because I had listened once to a person who failed because, and when I was listening, I was almost crying because it was consecutive, it was perfect. In English, I don't know Spanish that well, but the sad part was she didn't get to the other sections. And in order to pass the exam, you need to get some scores in each section. So, well, you probably could give up. That's 2% of translation, but sometimes that comes in helpful too. So keep that in mind. Now, the second type of items are simultaneous. There are two. Each vignette is no longer than 2 minutes. In fact, they're roughly around 1.5 minutes. They're very short. And here you'll press one button, play button, and that performs the recording at the same time. And you need to begin interpreting, I would say, within 10 seconds. You can start interpreting right away, but usually you really need to hear at least a couple of units of meaning so you can start the sentence correctly in your language. And you can still take notes, but in this case, it's very important. If you never took notes in your life before, don't start doing it on the exam, except for two things: numbers and names. Everything else, don't even try. If you are skilled in note-taking, absolutely, that is a very helpful tool, but exam is not the time to learn this skill of note-taking. You're not allowed to replay or pause the simultaneous, right? There is time added at the end for you to catch up, because you naturally all will lag behind, but it's not that much time. So, and I will talk about the scoring and give you tips on what to do in a little bit. Now, the side translation item. When you take that item, there are 3 excerpts. On one screen is 1 excerpt. It's really short. I think the length is around, it's 3 sentences, and I think the length is about up to 45 words. Don't quote me on that one, but I know it's 3 sentences. And each passage represents different kinds of documents. In other words, it's not 3 passages from the same document, but they represent patient education, institutional, or legal or quasi-legal types of texts. By patient education, it's obvious, but institutional, it's like history intake form. History form or intake form. Quasi-legal, these are the it won't be your power of attorney by any means, because that's not what we are allowed to cite translate in healthcare. But it'll be something like where you need to sign something, and it'll be, again, just 3 sentences, or some kind of information about their rights if you're participating in some medical study, for example. And then the last question is written. You will see an English paragraph, and then you will see 4 options of translation of that English paragraph into Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin. And here you need to kind of put your head to understand what's correct translation. It's the one that preserves not only the lexical equivalency, which includes register, but also follows closely the format and the form of the original. Because unlike site translation, which is done orally, translation is written. And I know it's linguistically, written translation is, repeating itself, but we do it so there is no confusion with the site translation. So you really need to glance at those 4 passages and pick the one that, in your opinion, has no errors. And that's would constitute 2% of your score. You would think that 2% is a little, but, the hardest part to take is when you failed by 1 point. Our passing point is 450 points, and I'll talk about scoring later. So, but if you get the score of 449, you still fail. And if you had that 2%, that would be very helpful. So don't underestimate, in other words, the value of that question. Now, what do you need to do when you come to the test site? Well, first of all, bring with you notice to schedule. It could be printed out or it could be on your phone. The sad part is you're not allowed to take anything inside the room, so the phone will be, you'll have to leave it in the locker. So that's why I would recommend, this is the only time that I would recommend to printing things, because who cares, they can keep the paper, right? And your photo ID, which is current and signed. It's important that the name on your ID matches exactly the name on the notice to schedule. So when you receive the email from us with a notice to schedule, look, if your name there is wrong, email us right away and we will change it both in the Prometric system and in your notice, and we'll send you a new notice. But if you show up and your ID shows different name, you may be turned away, and the Proctor will be right, because your name should match. Arrive early so you can park, so you can find the place within the building, because not all test sites are standalone buildings. Some of them are in, on certain floors. You'll get all that information when you schedule the exam. And of course, this is done, these centers are run by Prometric, so emailing us at CCHI headquarters won't help, even though I did once get an email from a candidate saying, you know what, I'm driving around and I don't see it. Is it behind McDonald's? I don't know if it's behind McDonald's. So we have, over 1,000 test sites. As I mentioned, you're not allowed to take anything inside the room. So if you have any kind of medical condition that requires you to take some medication in it, etc., there's special rules for it. Let us know. And by us, I mean your email is either to apply@, or info@, and I give you a hint, apply@. That email, apply@cchicertification.org, is good if you're talking about your application, your initial, setting up. But when you're at the CHI level, you're best answered by the info@. The staff interchanges and forwards the emails to each other, obviously, but the quicker would be the one that goes directly to info@ if your questions are about the exam. You will be given pens and paper for note-taking. Proctor will be monitoring your performance. Different sites handle it differently. In some, it's just a video camera and the proctor is watching that. Some, they can see you through the window. Some, they're in the same room, so it varies. You will have about 20 to 30 minutes, I think it's roughly set to 20 minutes, to test your, sorry, this is a typo here, to test your headset and to read the introduction. And this time does not count towards your exam. That's just pretty much to orient you. And then you click the start the exam button, and that takes 1 hour. And even if you don't finish after 1 hour, the exam will stop and all your responses are saved automatically. So you won't lose it, but you may just run out of time. Now, the headsets, there are two kinds. The majority of sites use this type of headset. The reason I'm showing it is so that you can see it's over the ear. And some of the test sites may have this headset. And if you are retaking the exam, that you, of course, are more familiar with this one, the bad part about this, I mean, all is good, but it has the mute button. And when you mute yourself, this red light turns on. And normally, we think red means recording. Well, on this headset, red means you're mute. So don't mute yourself. Don't touch it after you set everything up and you tested the volume. Everything is good. Just don't press it with your elbow or don't touch it with your thumbs. The other part I want to bring your attention to is the new look of test controls. Of course, if it's your first exam taking experience, then it doesn't matter for you. That's how it should look. But if you're retaking the exam, it'll look different than the previous. This is what our upgrade did. So you start with the section that's called Introduction. And you see there the timer here. It says introduction time remaining. That's what I meant by about 10 to 15 minutes. So it's not your real exam yet. The introductory screen will describe again that there are 4 consecutive, all this good stuff that I told you right now. These pages, there are 14 pages, I think, on the introduction. It tells you what different controls are, how you select the item, how you press play, how you press record. If you have never taken an exam online, look through the pages. This is that next button that you'll be navigating through it, or you can click 1, 2, 3. Don't spend, too much time. It's pretty self-explanatory, but look at it. If you are comfortable with the computers, obviously it'll take you less time, but on average, I try to read everything to see that if there are typos. It took me about 5 minutes to read. Now, when you're ready, you will click the Start the Test button, which is located here at the bottom right. And after that, the real timer, what I call the real timer, 60-minute timer starts. And your screens will be different in terms of it will show you one item at a time. And at the top, you'll still have the timer, but this time the timer in the word section here means the actual exam. It's called section because that's what the software is like. You cannot change certain things there. But here it will start with 60 minutes, and then, it will show you how much time is remaining. You will get pop-ups at, I believe, 10 minutes and 5 minutes, when there are 10 or 5 minutes left to let you know, and they'll be also somewhat, appearing here. And when you are done with the exam, if you're done before your time is up, then you can click the Finish section. Section in this case means the real exam. So don't click this button unless you already finished the multiple choice question. This header is on every screen, so don't go there. The good thing is you cannot accidentally do it, because when you click here, you'll get the first pop-up saying, "Are you sure you want to finish this section?" And if you say yes, there is a second pop-up in slightly different location saying, "Are you seriously sure that you want?" And then you say yes, and then there's a third pop-up which tells you, "Well, we're going to finish the exam section," but the section means the exam. So again, you cannot do it accidentally. You can always cancel if you get that pop-up. I just want to bring your attention that the word section here means the exam, because after that, the last section of your experience, of your appointment, is a 4-question survey where we ask you, did you have enough time? Did you have any issues? That kind of stuff, so that we can monitor very closely the performance of this new software and of each test site too. Now, I see there is a question about what is the percentage of candidates that pass the exam? Well, that varies by the language. As far as the Spanish candidates go, because they're, we feel because there's more training available and the pool is larger, the passing rate is around 70 to 75% of candidates who pass the exam. For Mandarin, it's around 40 to 50%. It varies by the year. And Arabic is between 15 to 28%. So again, it varies drastically by the year because the numbers are small. Now, the other new feature is the way the actual recording controls or test controls look. The recording part is called audio capture. On the screen above it, you'll have the playback, like a normal play. Click play. That's how you will hear the actual audio. But this underneath it, you will see this little control. That is how you'll record, and it's self-explanatory. When you're ready, you click the record button. When I say when you're ready, I truly think that you listened to the audio. Take a second in your head and think of what you're going to say, and then click record. Because you see here, it says 17 seconds. That's how much we allot you to record that utterance. And, this number varies. Don't pay too much attention to what it is. You cannot change it. It's something that was established by the subject matter experts. It works. It's validated. But if you don't know what to say, and we hear that sometimes, you will start like, and that becomes, that your 17 seconds will run out very fast. So think, but don't think too long. But think and click record. If you're done recording sooner, I advise you that you move forward to the next item. And in that case, you need to click that save button, which stops the recording. If you need all 17 seconds, then, you get to it. You don't have to click the save. It automatically saves at the end. And then you click next screen, etc. But if you're done sooner, then you can click that. Now, for simultaneous, as I already mentioned earlier, there is only one button, play, and that button will start your recording. Now, you cannot pause recording and you cannot re-record. You only have one attempt to record your answer. Also, do not double click on play or record buttons. And if you have any problems, so you think there are any problems, contact the proctor. Raise your hand, whichever way. When your proctor signs in to the computer, ask them, how do I find you if I need you? For example, you are given paper and pencil. What if the pencil breaks, right? So they're not going to give you 10 pencils. They'll give you one pencil, but they're available, or they'll show you the pencils are over there. I know it sounds unrealistic, but we did have one candidate who used 5 pencils. They just nervousness, you break them. So things happen. Don't worry about it. Just know how would you resolve them. And so always in the beginning of the appointment, at the time when nothing counts, ask the proctor how you get to paper, how you get to pens, and how you can get their attention. Now, it's important to remember you're not allowed to leave the practice to the testing room. The exam is only 1 hour, so unfortunately there are no exceptions. Even for ADA accommodations, there are no exceptions. Now, after the exam is scored by human raters. And human means what? It means that it's not automatic and it's not fast. I already said that we'll try to do something different this time and to shorten the period, but normally it's about 6 to 8 weeks after the last day of testing. We've been averaging 5 weeks. We'll see if we'll be able to do it sooner. We also email you the official score, but you always can find your score in your profile when you log into that cchilearningbuilder.com. Let's talk about the exam results. So how do we score it? First of all, I want you to know that raters do not know the candidates' identities, and they don't know if you pass or fail, and they cannot influence that. Because of that, they cannot really influence that. They cannot intentionally do something to you. Each oral response, each recording is scored by 2 raters, right? So you have 7 recordings, each by 2, so potentially 14 people can score your exam. Usually, the raters do not see the final score. They do not see who this recording belongs to, but usually on average there are about 5 raters who will score your exam. If 2 raters that scored 1 response disagreed by 1 point, then a 3rd rater is scoring it. Now, total scores are weighted according to our proprietary formula. And that's something that I cannot share with you because we don't really want you to study to pass the exam. We want you to study to become interpreters or to become certified interpreters. So if you have the skills, you will it'll be reflected in your score. We don't need to share with you how we will actually calculate it. But the score that is scaled, and you will see a distribution of 300 to 600 points. The passing point is 450. That's your magic number. I can tell you that those who scored 449, of course, it is very sad, but most of the time, I think so far all of them who retake the exam, they always pass. So to me, 449 means that you were too nervous. Seriously, because 450 means that you're also nervous, or that you're just on the border, right? So whichever way you want to be, pessimistic or optimistic. We have had scores. I mean, usually the scores are around 470 to give you like that empirical view. We did have one candidate for Spanish exam who scored 600, but in general, higher scores among Arabic and Mandarin and Spanish are, same way distributed according to the volume of each group. Each candidate's audio response is scored on 4 rating scales. Each scale has the same weight. So what raters do, they listen to your response at least 4 times, sometimes more, and they put a score for each of the scales. One of the scales is lexical content. In other words, raters will be looking for how accurately you preserve the units of information of the source speech or text. And a unit of information could be a word, a phrase that communicates a single concept. And on this scale, the normal errors or the usual errors include omissions, additions, and inaccurate translations. In other words, actually number 1 type of errors we see is omission. And that's really interesting because that means 2 things, that very rarely it's omission because you really didn't know the word. Oftentimes it's either you didn't listen carefully, you didn't take notes, or you didn't hear what you said. I don't know if, you're like me, but I often talk to my husband and he said, "You never said that." And I said, "No, I said that." He goes, "No, you didn't." I said, "Next time I'll record it." Well, the exam records it. So if you don't hear yourself, if you omitted it, the raters hear these omissions. And we did an analysis of our failed candidates' responses, and the number 1 error is omission. So very important to monitor yourself. The next scale, or another scale, is register of speech. This one is quite important because register is a variety of language used for a particular purpose or in a particular social setting. In other words, we can say it's a level of formality that the speaker chooses for their speech. So we raters evaluate how you are able to match the register of the source of your prompt to what you produce in your interpretation. Of course, raters are also interpreters. They know there are differences, but it's important if you hear in English, and that's usually where the errors happen. If you hear in English the person saying, well, the injections will be delivered in a sterile environment, you cannot interpret it like, "I'll give you a shot in a clean room," right? Because that would be a change of register from formal to informal. And same thing if you hear the English source saying something, "Oh, honey, that boo-boo hurts, but it will take just a second." You cannot interpret it like, "Oh, little child, I know that I caused you some pain, but the pain will disappear in 5 seconds. That's change of register the other direction, right? So make sure that if you hear somebody talking in formal language, that's usually what we have in English, then you interpret it in a formal language typical for your language, Spanish, Arabic, or Mandarin. And because all these 3 languages are highly developed languages, you do have all 3 registers in them. So you cannot say that, "Oh, in my country we don't speak that formally." You speak that formally when you speak at the university level. So if you have formal in English, do formal in Spanish, Arabic, or Mandarin. Just keep that in mind. Now, grammar is another scale, and here we're just looking for your correct grammar. The grammar, the raters evaluate your ability to speak clearly and with proper tense coordination and agreement, using the pronouns correctly, using correct word order. So if an English was a question, don't turn it into a statement, in other words, or by word order, I don't mean that changing the word order. Changing, if it's okay in your language, like for example, if in Mandarin certain parts, certain clauses go first and in English they go last, of course you will change them. What I'm talking about when it is incorrect order, when you are pretty much speaking like an English speaker who just learned the other language, right? So that's where your grammar is. And I can tell you that we actually don't have that many candidates with very poor grammar. With there may be slightly more of that in Spanish because we have more candidates for whom Spanish is not a native language. Majority of our Arabic and Mandarin candidates are native speakers of Arabic and Mandarin, so they will have grammar errors in English. And of course, raters give just one score to your grammar, regardless of whether it's Spanish and for consecutive, right? That's really tricky because you interpret into languages. Obviously, you will get, depending on the criticality of error. So if your grammar error was pretty bad, then it doesn't matter that one language was perfect. It means that your communicative intent of interpreting didn't get completed, and for that reason you will get a low grammar score. And the last scale used is quality of speech, and by that we mean that the physical characteristics of your speech are assessed. And the common errors here will be false starts, like there's a hesitation, but false start will be, oh, you know what I mean, that's not what I meant. So all that would be, or cardiology, no, I meant endocrinology. That would be the errors that will be counted here. And again, I'm saying counted. We don't count errors. We listen at your response, and then this raters are trained to assign a score without counting how many times you did commit such error. Self-repairs or self-corrections, poor pronunciation of words that affected the meaning. We all have accents. We don't score your accents. We don't assess your accents. But if the way you pronounced a certain word made the raters like think, huh, did they say this or that? Let me listen again. And they will replay, right? But in real life, nobody's going to replay your interpreting. So for that reason, you would get lower score if you mispronounced a word to the point that it has changed the meaning. And of course, the pace. If you consistently will run out of time on finishing your interpretation, that's when you will get the score lowered. And so your final score is a combination of all these 4 scores weighted to the specific level. The reasons for errors. Well, as I said, number one reason is omission. I mean, number one error is omission, and the reason for that, in our perspective, is failure to monitor the output. And the next one is misunderstanding of the source language. In other words, you simply didn't understand for some reason. Your poor memory skills or no note-taking. It was in one of the forms you would have some numbers. And we know that you all can say 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But we've heard candidates who would add numbers. You know, like for example, there were, we know that on the exam, let's say there are 4 numbers and they will interpret 5 numbers. They would change numbers, not only like transpose, right? Just completely change them. You have notes, you have paper and pencil, write down the numbers. That's my number one request to you. Insufficient proficiency in English. That's what usually grammar. If your English is really a weak language, that will be reflected on the exam. Lack of knowledge of medical terminology and body parts. Even though we have basic terminology, it still surprises me how we do have candidates who fail who don't have the knowledge of how to say these words correctly or even convey the meaning. Again, I want you to understand that raters are looking for meaning. And if, for example, you hear in English the word that in your language has 2 meanings, and in the beginning you don't know which one to use the correct one that you think is correct. Raters know there are 2 meanings, and they will not reduce your score because you use the one or the other. They just want to know that you're using one of those two, if there are two correct ones, and not a third one which is incorrect. How can you help yourself? Well, learn to monitor your output. Literally, about distinguishing part between a bilingual speaker and an interpreter is that interpreters are trained to hear what they say and correct yourself. I know there are not, you may think like, oh, I made a mistake. If you caught yourself recording a mistake, correct it, because raters will score your last word, whatever you used as the correct. Practice text analysis, because one of the reasons why we sometimes omit, because we didn't quite understand that this was an important part of information. From your opinion, it was not important. Why? Somehow our brain didn't pay attention. So by doing the text analysis, when you analyze and think like, oh, these are the key points, this is, the logic of this thought, think of the intended meaning, think of the implied meaning. It's fun to do that on newspaper articles, especially nowadays with all the wonderful political debate happening. People say things that are illogical, and when you analyze, you will test your own logic analyzing those things. But there are many texts that you can do. Textbooks are not very good for that, because textbooks are usually written very logically. So you need to get the speeches which are have some flaws in them that you're able to then, train critically your ability to discern those speeches. Practice memory skills, because as I said, one utterance is up to 35 words. So if you're able to repeat 35 words, you should be fine. You should remember more. But again, it's not about the rote memory. It's about the meaning memory, right? So did you remember all the meanings? That's what we're after. And of course, always improve proficiency in English and the other language. Study medical terminology, usually through parallel texts. It's, if you don't interpret often, let's say for pediatrics, find some text in English and pediatrics, and then on the same topic, find it in your language, Spanish, Arabic, or Mandarin, and read both. And this way you read all the terms in the context, and you learn some concepts, and oh, that's how they talk about it. So it's important to do that. Now, how do you prepare? There was one question that I want to address before I move on, and that question is about what version of Arabic we use on our exams. So we attempted to use the modern standard Arabic, but it mostly, I would call it actually educated modern standard Arabic. We have voice talents record the educated speech in different accents. We have, I believe, Jordanian, Iraqi, Lebanese accents by the patients recorded on our exams. But when you interpret, I strongly encourage you to interpret from English into Arabic using either modern standard Arabic, or if this is not your strong version, then into modern educated Arabic. If you're from Egypt, that will be your educated Egyptian. If you're from, Morocco, it will be your educated Moroccan, because you're interpreting English, and most of our English is either neutral or high register. It's very rarely low register. So don't lower the register. In other words, try not to use regionalism. But I also want you to know that our raters are from different Arabic-speaking countries. They're all native Arabic speakers. So if they come across a word that they have not been familiar with, they will, consult and find if that is accepted in your country. But the majority of errors, again, come actually from your translation into English and concern about omissions. Now, as far as since I mentioned who our raters in Arabic, the same is true for Mandarin. All of them are native Mandarin speakers of different versions from Republic of China, from Taiwan, from Hong Kong, and for Spanish, we have also raters who are native English speaker who learn Spanish as a second language. We also have heritage speaker, and we have native speakers from different countries. So we try to make it fair. I'm, sure that by all that description of mine, you already heard that we're trying to make it balanced. Now, how to prepare? If you go to our website, our main website, main is the keyword because we have another one, and I'll talk about that in a second. Click on the education, and you get to this page, which has tons of information. First, it has this go to training portal. I'll talk about that in a second. But then we have these accordions or bars, which say free mini glossaries, which are in Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin. Not many, but some. Exam preparation resources. From there, you can click on another page which has additional resources. So it's kind of like accordion. You get more and more there. Then there are codes of ethics. That's for core CCHI exam that you don't necessarily need it for CCHI. And then medical terminology in multiple languages. These are external links for your terminology preparation. Now, if you go to that go to training portal, you get to our second website, which is cchiinterpreters.org. That's our training portal. On that portal, we have continuing education courses, but we also have a practice exam. This practice exam has sample items. It's you click on the image, Spanish, Mandarin, or Arabic is below here. It didn't get captured. It's free. You just need to enter the key, study for you. That key is described here, so you don't need to memorize it. It's on that web page. And you need to use your own recording device. To make it free, we just eliminated the storage opportunity. So what you'll see there is you'll be able to hear there's a consecutive dialogue and a simultaneous vignette. So you click play, you hear it, record yourself, because then you click next, and on the next screen you will see one of the correct versions of the interpretation of what you just heard. So you can listen to your interpretation and compare to what you see on the screen. And for simultaneous and side translation, you will also give you tips on how many seconds you should do it. So I strongly recommend you record yourself so you can compare and see if you interpret everything correctly, but is your timing good? For consecutive, we don't have the timing because usually they're very short. But for simultaneous and for side translation, we do have recommendation for the timing for those specific samples. Now, let me talk a little bit more since the part of this webinar that I consider very important is tips on how to prepare. I'll spend the next 10 minutes talking about that. And I'm a teacher in the past, so I really love teaching. So start by creating a list of healthcare specialties with the ones where you interpret most often for. Those are the ones that you can study last because you already know them, right? If you're just starting and you don't have the ones that most often interpret for, then of course you have to study for each specialty equally. And you need to think about common terms that in common situations, like for example, respiratory health, right? What you need to know. You need to know the body organs. You need to know what would be the most frequent conditions, which would be what's your flu, your cold, your asthma, lung cancer, right? Those kind of things. Then find on YouTube videos on these subjects. So try to find videos that are in English, that are explained by healthcare professionals, but also search for the patients, both English and non-English. So on YouTube, search in Spanish, lung cancer, and see, I don't know why I get that example. Let's say bronchitis, and then see how a patient will describe their symptoms in Spanish, Arabic, or Mandarin. It is important to watch these videos in both languages so that you're exposed to the patterns of speech in those languages, and you'll get kind of the matched terms. I especially like some obscure specialties. You don't need it for the exam, but when I do my continuing education, I look for some obscure terms and listen to providers on YouTube speaking about it in English, because this way I know how to pronounce those things. Because when we look at them, English is not my native language. I have some funny ideas of how it should be pronounced, but when I hear it on the video, I'm thinking, that's how I should pronounce it. Now, find as many documents that are used in healthcare as possible. If you're going to interpret in hospitals, in any office, pick up whatever they have there, right? Then read them, sight translate them, translate them. Remember yourself when you learned the language first. What, at least I in school in Russia was told, you were given text and you translate it, then you bring to the teacher, and she marks it all in red, and then you go over again, right? Do the same thing to yourself with the sight translation documents. If you don't go to many different specialties, then search online. Like when you identify the specialty, and it's not about 12, right? And then, watch at least one video, read at least one document. This way you don't have to look up in dictionary that much. You will have it in a more natural format. If you're really very textbook oriented, buy textbooks with dialogues and healthcare interpreting. I don't know that there are that many. I think there are like 3 or 4 around, but they are very helpful. They give you the model interpretations. Record yourself. The best way, the least stressful way to assess whether you can do it or not is play that YouTube video, and as you're playing it, record yourself, then listen to yourself, and then compare, and that's when you have that. Nobody knew that you made mistakes, just for you. If you have a language partner, that's great, because then you can, but you need to be very comfortable with them. I don't recommend close friends, and I don't recommend close colleagues. I'm joking, but it's up to you. If you're thick skin and you can withstand criticism, do it with the friend and the closest colleague. If not, then find somebody who you don't know online and practice with them. The various multiple mobile phone apps that you can record with yourself nowadays. If you're still on the desktop or laptop, Audacity is a wonderful app. There's also a mobile app with the same name. So it's free, and it allows you to record yourself and listen to yourself. Now, there are different kinds of pre-interpreting exercises that you can do. And by pre-interpreting, I mean they're not really assessing your interpreting, but they're preparing you. And you can mix and match topics, so don't do all on one topic. So, because it's pretty boring. So start with cognition, right? Understanding text analysis, as I said. When you read the text, you can distinguish between critical and secondary information. Chunk it in terms of count the units of meaning, right? Let's say you read a sentence and say, okay, how many units of meanings are there? Because units of meanings are not words, right? I am going to. It's really just one unit of meaning. I mean, it is two, I and am going to, but it's really just one in the context of interpreting. And you cannot even start interpreting because you don't know what goes next, right? I'm going to the cinema. I'm going to have dinner in a moment. So all these things that text analysis help you with. Memory development. And when you think about memory development, think about 2 things. First is retaining longer utterances. That's great. But the most important thing for the exam is what I call clearing the cache, training your memory to forget. If you, on the exam, let's say you listen to the utterance, you recorded it, as soon as the recording stopped, you realized, oh no, I made a mistake. Make yourself forget that, because take a deep breath, and after that, start listening to the next utterance like a clean slate and recording that utterance. Really, on the exam, don't, get yourself more stressed out. Think of chunks of those utterances when you're doing consecutive. Now, attention span, increase in concentration. Try to, when you're doing simultaneous interpreting or even consecutive interpreting, ask your kids or partner to interrupt you so that you can backtrack. Because the harder you do it for yourself, it's like with athletes, right? The harder you train, the easier you perform. So train for the Olympics, then the exam will be like nothing. Comprehension. Read those healthcare documents, and as you read them, you'll realize I have no idea what they're saying. Read it again. It's not like they're necessarily written in good English, but they will kick in your critical ability to figure out what they mean. And that's, again, you're making it harder for yourself. And then processing speed. If you notice, especially in our sample exam, that you were too slow, then practice on the same text first and then on different texts. Delivery is a different aspect of interpreting. The first one was your understanding. Right now, delivering, paraphrase or restating. Do it in the same language. Do it between the languages. Again, you'll consciously be not interpreting. You'll be consciously just rephrasing it. But that keeps your mind agile. Summarize. I know on the exam you are not going to summarize. You should not summarize. But when you prepare, summarizing gives you what? It gives you this ability to ascertain what's the critical points there. And usually when we make mistakes during interpreting, it's because our focus was somewhere else and not on critical points. Let's say you hear a speech in English, summarize it in English, but then summarize it in your Spanish, Arabic, or Mandarin, and you'll see how different it is. Then do your own presentations. The best way to learn a subject, if, for example, if you're a male and you never interpreted for labor and delivery, make yourself speak about labor and delivery. First of all, you'll see how your mouth cannot say certain words, and I'm not kidding. And then you will also see how hard it is, and then do this presentation for your female friend who will just correct you and say, well, yeah, that's a good word, but that's not how we usually say it. Language transfer skills. To prepare yourself for, better switching between the two languages, you really need to know not only the two languages, but the subject matter in both languages equally. So parallel texts and videos that I described earlier are invaluable here. And for simultaneous interpreting, another kind of pre-interpreting exercise will be shadowing with paraphrasing. In other words, normal shadowing is when you hear, let's say, an English speech and you repeat everything. Try to do that with your friend when she's talking to you, right, on the phone, and in your head repeat everything in English. I'm kidding, but paraphrasing would be when you don't repeat exactly what the person says, but you restate it in the same language. And try to make yourself lag behind. So if you let the speaker speak longer and then you start paraphrasing or even repeating it, you will see how interesting your brain behaves. And pay attention to the intonation. Try to imitate the intonation. Try to be an actor. These exercises are for you so that when you come to the exam, you feel comfortable. Now the actual interpreting exercises. I suggest, it's based on a wonderful book of how our brain learns. How do we learn? I think that's what it's called. Do it in 3 attempts. So pick a speech or a text. By speech, I mean like a video of YouTube, let's say, about appendicitis, right, or removal of appendix. Do this practice with the same speech at different times of the day, in different rooms, in different locations, in the park, at home, and with the soft music of your choice. It really doesn't matter what music you'd use. Studies show that it really doesn't matter. If you want rock, it could be rock. If you want classical, it could be classical. All this is meant for your brain to kind of try something in a different situation, because when you come to the test, it's a different situation. It's not the same as your work. It's not the same as your home. So by doing these practices in different environments, you're preparing your body and your brain for performing in an unusual environment, because you've never been to that testing room, right? So this is kind of psychological training for you. And then don't do it like 3 days in a row. Have rest days. And on the rest days, you can either do something else on a different topic or don't do anything. Just let yourself rest. So what do? First day 1, you just found that speech. You record yourself interpreting it consecutively. Listen to recording, compare, and underline all the errors that you made. Then skip 2 days. On day 3 and 4, listen to that speech again, same speech. And instead of interpreting, paraphrase, shadowing it. In other words, restate it in the same language. Or also you can search for a text or video on the same subject in the target language. Not in the same one, but in the target one. So if your speech A was in English, now it will be your same speech on the same subject matter, but in Spanish. Listen to it. Read more about the subject matter. Look up terms all from the same speech or in general on that subject matter. Retell that speech. Don't interpret, just retell it as if you're telling the friend about it, and record yourself. And then summarize it in the target language. Then again, rest a day, and then interpret that speech again as you did the first day, and listen and see how many errors you made. If you made fewer errors, that means that you're good. You kind of mastered that subject matter area, and your consecutive interpreting skills are in place. Now, if then you move on to the next subject matter and the next subject matter and the next subject matter. If, however, you found out that you have more errors or the same errors or as many errors but different ones as on day one, that's a little sadder situation, but it's not bad yet. What you do is you find a different speech B, on the same topic, and do the same 3 things again. Another 6-day passes, you do that, and you record yourself and listen again. And at this point, you shouldn't have as many errors, because if you do, you need to be very honest of yourself and decide what is it. If it is the subject matter that simply does not stick to your head, in other words, you just for some reason cannot understand it, that's a little easier, because all you need is just to read more about that subject matter, right? Or if it really is about one of the languages, English or Spanish, Arabic, or Mandarin. And if that's the case, then you know that will take you longer to bring your weaker language on par with a more dominant language. But again, it doesn't cost you anything. 17 days, and you will know if you're ready for the exam, because anything on the exam will be, I can guarantee you, much easier than this kind of exercise you put yourself through. So what happens after the exam? When you pass, within 1 or 2 weeks, you get your score report, and you get, after 1 or 2 weeks after the score report, you get your certificate. And the date of passing the exam is your date of certification, your first day. Then after that, certification is valid for 4 years, and you need to earn continuing education to recertify, and that will be in a different webinar. If you missed the email with the certificate, don't hesitate to email us to apply at, and we will resend it to you once. After that, you can order it from our contractor at brightdoc.com. Now, if you did not pass, you may retake the exam only after 90 days or in the next testing window, whichever is sooner. And you have to pay the fee again, because your fee is only good for one administration, because remember, we're paying all the raters too. All our raters are our employees, by the way. So that's a good thing, because that means we control their performance and their training. And we allow to take the exam up to 3 times within 1 year. Then you have to wait, and then you can do it again. We do have some candidates who took exam more than 3 times. I cannot tell you how many, but we do have candidates who, take more than 3 times. If you have any concerns about your score or want some more explanation, email us about it. It has to be in writing to appeal@, or info@cchicertification.org. Now again, don't forget about that E2E study. Send an email to solutions@cchicertification.org, and then I will send you the link to that survey, which you need to complete by the end of the holidays. And then the first real working week in the new year, January 6th, I will send you the instructions and how to schedule, because that's the time when I can add you to the Prometric system. I cannot add it sooner. It simply is not open yet for the study. And last but not least, I definitely want to wish you all the best. I wish you all to pass the exam, and I also hope that together we grow stronger in 2020. And now I'm going to open the floor to your questions.